You are going to be, everyone is muted, and we look forward to having a lively discussion with the who's who that we have today. So nice to have our original Hebrew school student Josh with us. And we are going to be honored to have Zoya, my travel partner to the Holy Land of Israel, the good old days, who's joining us today. And we have Shalom Mendel. Shalom Mendel here. We got half the Torrington, Connecticut community right here. This is fantastic. And the bracha that we have is that we are going to be discussing the twin pillars of Judaism, which is no and yes. So they tell the story that a 10-year-old Jewish boy was failing math, and his parents tried everything from tutors to hypnosis, but to no avail. Finally, at the assistance of a family friend, they decided to enroll their son in a private Catholic school. And after the first day, the parents were surprised when he walked in after school. He was focused, he was determined, and he had this unique, serious expression on his face. And he went straight past them, right to his room, and quietly closed the door. And for nearly 2 hours, he toiled away in his room doing his homework. And with his math book strewn about his desk and the surrounding floor, and he emerged long enough to eat, and quickly after finishing his plate went straight back to his room, closed the door, and worked feverishly at his studies until he had to go to sleep. And this pattern of behavior continued until it was time for the first quarter's report card. And the boy walked in with it unopened, and he laid it onto the dinner table and went straight to his room. So cautiously, his mother opened it, and to her amazement, she saw a large red A under the subject of math. And overjoyed, she and her husband rushed into the son's room, thrilled at his remarkable progress. After thinking, was it the nuns that did it? And the boy shook his head no. He says, what is the one-on-one tutoring? And the boy shook his head no. The textbook, the teachers, the curriculum, no. So the son speaks up. He says, on the first day when I walked into the front door and saw that guy, that Jewish guy, nailed to the plus sign, I knew they meant business. Anyways, the store manager overheard a clerk saying to the customer, no, ma'am, we haven't had any for some weeks now, and it doesn't look as if we'll be getting it any soon. Alarmed by what was saying, the manager rushed over to the customer who was walking out the door and said, this isn't true, man. Of course we'll have it some soon. In fact, we placed an order for it a couple of weeks ago. Then the manager drew the clerk over and seriously concerned, he looked at it and says, never, never say we don't have something. Even if we don't have it, say we ordered it and it's on the way. Now, what is it what she wanted? So the clerk smiled and said, rain. So there's a fascinating and perplexing story in the Talmud. The Talmud in Tractate of Shabbos says a Gentile once came before Shammai. Shammai was the name of the rabbi. There was Hillel and Shammai. And he said, convert me to Judaism on the stipulation that you teach me the entire Torah as I stand on one leg. And Shammai, the Talmud tells us, Shammai drove him off with a builder's measuring stick in his hand. Now, the Talmudic sage Shammai was a builder by profession. So this convert leaves Rabbi Shammai and goes to the next rabbi, Rabbi Hillel. And the Talmud tells us he converted him. And said Hillel to him, what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. This is the entire Torah. The rest is commentary, go and learn. Now, Hillel and Shammai were two leading rabbis in the early 1st century BCE. And they founded opposing schools of Jewish thought. One was known as the House of Hillel, the other one was known as the House of Shammai. And they lived in Jerusalem during the time of King Herod and the Roman Emperor Augustus. And it was a turbulent and bloody century before the destruction of the Second Temple, which happened in 70 CE. So Shammai, who was born 50 BCE and passed away 30 CE, was one of the leading and spiritual and moral figures of the day. And he was usually more stringent in matters of Jewish law and ethics than his colleague Hillel, who was born 110 BCE and passed away 7 CE. And Hillel became one of the most important figures in Jewish history. He was the founder of a dynasty of sages who stood at the head of the Jews living land of Israel until roughly the 5th century of the Common Era. And it is the above story in the Talmud which captures Hillel ethic or of the golden rule, which is that which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. Now, Hillel's response is understood. 1 century later, Rabbi Akiva would comment on the verse in this week's Torah portion, love your fellow as yourself. In Hebrew, it's v'ahavta l'reacha kamecha. And Rabbi Akiva would say, this is a cardinal principle in the Torah. Yet Shammai's behavior is perplexing. Even if Shammai felt that the Gentile was insincere, he could have told him respectfully that he's not ready to conversion. Why throw him away with his measuring stick? So to be sure, the approach of Shammai and of his school throughout the Talmud is usually more stringent than Hillel. The school of Hillel was stricter and less flexible than the school of Shammai was stricter and less flexible than the school of Hillel. And the Kabbalah explains that Shammai's soul was rooted in the energy of Gevurah, which is strength and discipline, while Hillel's soul was rooted in the energy of Chesed, which is loving kindness. But being strict doesn't always mean being rude. Taking more severe approach does not allow for denigrating another human being. Shammai perhaps was unimpressed with someone demanding to learn the entire Torah in 30 seconds while standing on one leg. It does not give him the right to throw him away with a measuring stick. So the question becomes far stronger. Last week, we started a custom in the Jewish tradition that from Passover, some people just do it till Shavuos, Chabad, we do it till Rosh Hashanah. Every week we study a chapter of Ethics of Our Fathers. Why? Summertime, the sun is hotter, our evil inclination is a little hotter, so we need an extra dose of ethics. So last week, in the first chapter of Ethics of Our Fathers, there's a Mishnah. It says, Shammai says, I'll translate. Make your study a permanent fixture of your life. Say little and do much, and receive every man with a pleasant countenance. Now, according to Shammai's instruction, one ought to receive every human being, no matter race, color, or faith, in a graceful and respectful fashion. Why then would Shammai behave in the opposite fashion and drive away a human being in a seemingly harsh and unsympathetic gesture? So at first glance, his behavior seems impolite and offensive. Also, why does the Talmud emphasize that Shammai drove away the Gentile convert with a builder's measuring stick? Why is that detail necessary? What kind of stick it was? If it was PVC, or if it was metal, or if it was a builder's stick, who cares if he drove him away with a wave of his arm or with his cane or any other item? So the year was the year of my bar mitzvah. It was 1985, and it was the night before Shavuos. And during a public address, our dear Rebbe presented explanation of Shammai's behavior. Now, Shammai was not being a hypocrite, contradicting his own teaching of how to greet people in the most beautiful way, nor was he being unkindly. To the contrary, Shammai was assisting this Gentile in his journey. You see, the Gentile came to Shammai and said, teach me the entire Torah as I stand on one leg. And Shammai did just that. You see, when the Talmud states that Shammai drove him off with a builder's measuring stick, it doesn't mean that Shammai waved the stick and threw him out of the study home. It means that Shammai actually presented him with an answer to his quest, that to obtain the essence of Judaism while standing on one leg. You see, for all of Torah and all of Judaism, it consists of two pervasive themes: yes and no. And the two sages who embody these two twin pillars of Judaism were Hillel and Shammai. Judaism is a way of life, a system of thumbs. a perspective on existence, a day-to-day manual for living, which includes two dimensions: the yeses of life, what we embrace, and the no-nos of life, that's what we reject. And they're encapsulated in the first two of the Ten Commandments. What are the first two of the Ten Commandments that we're going to be reading, God willing, in the next holiday, which is the holiday of Shavuot? Number one, it says, I'm the Lord your God. Onoichi Hashem lekecha. Number two, it says, you shall have no other gods before me. So the first is the most fundamental and the foundation of all the positive commandments. All those actions, words, and thoughts which we hold so dear. And the second of the commandment is the basis and the essence of all the divine prohibitions. All those behaviors, habits, and actions, and addictions which we shun. So often we make the mistake of choosing the yeses of Judaism, and we dismiss the no-nos of Judaism. You see, many of us appreciate deeply the beauty of traditions, the rituals, the customs of Judaism. We enjoy the latkes, the hamantaschen, the matzah bowls, the sense of community, family, tradition, history, the culture, the social aspects of our faith, the commitment to education, charity, social justice, the idea of Shabbat and the centrality of Israel. But it's much harder for us to embrace the boundaries and restrictions. No Burger King, no shrimp, no cooking or opening a light or driving on Shabbat or koshering our kitchens, using a mikveh, putting on tefillin, putting a mezuzah on each door of our home. Can we enjoy one without the other? And this is the question many of us ask. Yet history has proven that the beautiful rituals, mitzvos, and traditions of Judaism, the celebration and quality of life it engenders, has remained vibrant only with those who stoppable of kind of maintaining the prohibitions. The two are simply inseparable. Why? Because every yes must include a no. Let me offer a few illustrations. Loyalty to your marriage means, by definition, the creation of a certain non-negotiable boundaries that you never cross. If you want to enjoy the cake and its icing too, you must say no to the other cakes. Yes is meaningless if it doesn't come with a no. What if a man tells his wife, or a wife tells her husband, I'm committed to you very deeply, but I'm also free to be with anyone at any time? That relationship usually will not endure. Take the example of living a healthy lifestyle. If someone embraces the yes of a healthy living by going to the gym 4 times a week, by doing yoga, their Pilates, but refuses to reject the daily lunch of 3 slices of pizza and a cheese Danish, and of course a Diet Coke. Or when they go out to the bar mitzvah, they cannot get away from the Viennese table and the potato and the pasta and the rice for dinner. The gym will produce very poor results. It's likely that after some time, the person will give up the gym. Because if I'm not ready for the no, I'm not ready for the yes. If you're struggling with addiction, you can't be going to a 12-step meetings and at the same time going for a drink once a week, or going to the casinos once a month, or behaving inappropriately. At some point, you'll fall hard because you're lying to yourself. There's no freedom without discipline. There's no growth without boundaries. There's no loyalty without restrictions. It's like the chords of a violin, which must be tied down to allow the music to play. You can't succeed in medical school and hang out in the clubs and the bars every night. For Judaism to be real, meaningful, and enduring, we must have the courage to say no to that which undermines our values and beliefs. These remain twin pillars of Judaism. I am the Lord your God. And then the second commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. So when the Gentile comes to Shammai and he's asking him to convert to Yiddishkeit, to Judaism, and to teach him the entire Torah while standing on one leg, Shammai pushed him away. With what says the Talmud? With his measuring stick. Shammai was not rejecting him. Shammai was not being rude, obnoxious, and dismissive. Shammai was rather teaching him one of the twin pillars of Yiddishkeit, the need and the ability to reject, to say no, to set boundaries, to push away certain behaviors, certain habits, certain cravings, certain thoughts. Shammai was essentially teaching him that the first thing he needed to know if he wants to become a Jew is how to reject those things in life which are immoral and unholy, how to say no to that which is contrary to God's will and blueprint of life. So that is why the Talmud says that Shammai drove him away with a builder's measuring stick. Why is that detail necessary? Who cares how he drove him away? Because Shammai was not trying to drive him away. Shammai was teaching this man the first important lesson in Judaism. If you want to build and construct a true edifice, you must be able to say no. If you think all of Judaism will be only about yes, we'll be building a house of cards. Now, what does Shammai's rejection really consist of? What is its nature? So there's a fascinating verse in the Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, that the great biblical poem where the divine groom extols the virtues of his beloved wife. It's a parable for the Jewish people. And in Shir HaShirim it says, your navel's like a round basin where no mixed wine is lacking, and your belly is like a stack of wheat fenced in with roses. Now, you read this passage, you're trying to figure out what does it mean? The Jewish belly is like a stack of wheat and it's fenced in by roses. So the Medrash and Rashi present an extraordinary interpretation. A stack of wheat refers to a stack of sins. In Hebrew, wheat is chitim. In Hebrew, sins are chatoim. Chitim, chatoim, it kind of sounds the same. So fenced in with roses refers to the words of Torah, which are as soft as roses. So Rabbi Levi said, when a Jewish man marries a woman at the age of 30 or 40, he spends much money on the wedding and finally wants to consummate the marriage. And she tells him that I saw an emission of blood as red as a rose, and he will immediately physically separate from her as the law of family purity requires. Who caused them to separate? Is there a wall of iron between them? Is there a steel pillar? Did a snake threaten to bite him? A scorpion? Why will he not approach her? It is only the words of Torah, which are as soft as a rose, as is written, do not approach a woman in the purity of her period. So likewise, if one has brought a dish of meat, but then is told forbidden fats fell into it, and he refrains and doesn't eat it, who caused him to do this? Did a snake threaten to bite him? A scorpion prevent him from eating it? No. It's only the words of Torah which are soft as roses, as it's written in Leviticus, do not eat fats or blood. So Rashi says he's traveling on the road and sees ripe figs on a fig tree, and he extends his arm to take them, and someone tells him they belong to someone else. It's not public. And he withdraws his arm not to violate theft. Again, he's fenced by roses. So there's a deeply moving message here. Roses, of course, do not constitute a concrete, tangible fence. Unlike thorns or barbed wire, roses are soft and cautioned, and one can easily step on them, trampling them and passing over them. What then prevents a person from trespassing a fence of roses? Not the physical barrier, but the beautiful aroma, the color, the shape and appeal of the roses. They themselves beseech the person. The roses cry out, do not trample me. Do not destroy me. Do not kill me just because you feel like it. So the roses themselves, in their refined splendor and gracious, exquisite demeanor, they themselves subtly demand from the human being the sensitivity to abstain from crushing such a beautiful creation. Roses are soft. They can't create resistance based on force, but they can create a far deeper form of resistance. The boundary that speaks to the subtle core of human dignity, to the soul of man, to the inner conviction that I am more than a beast. I am an ambassador of God in this world. So this sings the divine groom in the Song of Songs. It's the fence that surrounds the Jewish belly, the Jewish stomach. Our stomachs instinctively crave all sorts of things in life. Some of them unethical, some immoral, at times vulgar and destructive. But our bellies are encircled by a fence of roses, the fence of Torah's moral and ethical teachings. We live with an eternal fence, not one constructed of cement or thorns, not one built of threats, penalties, and, the scare factor. It's a fence that's constructed on soft, delightful, and lovely roses. So the Medrash and Rashi offer 3 illustrations. And, they tell the story that a fellow's at the airport, and there's a McDonald's, and it's selling hot dogs. And hundreds of people are enjoying the fast food with ketchup, mustard, sauerkraut. Yet our dear Jew has to satisfy himself with a lousy banana or apple that his wife packed. His plane is delayed for 3 hours. What fence is obstructing him or her from buying that Frankfurter cheeseburger? No nutritionist is stopping him. There's no rabbi making him feel guilty. It's again the fence of roses, our holy and sacred tradition of the Torah. I'm in the middle of a business deal, and I can easily up the charges or deceive a client. I can take something which belongs to you. What prevents me? Nobody will find out. I'll not be put to shame. So why not? Because it's Judaism fence of roses which surrounds my belly, not allowing my stomach, my appetite, my cravings, my addictions to trespass the red lines of ethical, moral, and just Torah behavior. Story told of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, who passed away sadly exactly 44 years before the Chabad in Litchfield was built. And he was born in the year 1740. He passed away in the year 1809, and he spent his life acting as the self-appointed character witness of the Jewish people. And it was the afternoon before Passover, and Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was wandering through the streets of the Jewish quarter, and he was seeking out local smugglers. From one, he quietly asked for a quote on contraband tobacco. From another, he inquired the availability of smuggled embroideries. No matter the merchandise, he thought everything was available at the right price. However, when he started asking his newfound acquaintance to supply him with some bread or schnapps, those very same businessmen who previously proved so accommodating, they balked at the rabbi. You're trying to insult me? The Seder will be starting in a few hours, and no Jew would even have a speck of chametz, of leavened bread, left in their home and business. Not one merchant was able to come up with even a crumb of bread or a little drop of schnapps. No matter the price offered, not one merchant was willing or able to come up even with anything. The town had converted into a Passover zone, a chametz-free zone. Now, thrilled with the results, the rabbi went into his study, closed the door, and he started to cry. And he said, God Almighty, look down with pride at your people. The Tsar has border guards and tax commissioners dedicated to his commands. The police and the courts are devoted to tracking down and punishing the smugglers and black marketers. And yet, anything one could possibly want is available. And he says, God, contrast this with the faith and fidelity of your fellow Jews. It's been over 3,000 years since you commanded us to observe Passover. There's no police, there's no guards, there's no courts and jails to enforce this edict. And yet every single Jew in Bardichev keeps your laws to the utmost. And with a full heart, he screamed, Mi ka'am Yisrael, who's like your nation Israel? So this is the fence of roses. The Songs of Songs defines as our life. Shammai says to them, the sage who embodied this quality of discipline and boundaries, the ability for us to set boundaries in life. He taught the Gentile that the first paradigm of Judaism with his builder stick. He said, if you want to truly build, you have the number one builder here, the Pshal Mendel. If you want to build a true edifice of moral and spiritual life, you must construct a fence of roses. Where? Around your belly. You must learn that some things are out of question for us if you want to take Judaism seriously. These are not fences that will appeal to each person, but to the sensitive heart. Trespassing them is like flattening a garden of the most luscious roses. Only now, says the Talmud, was the Gentile ready to come Hillel and absorb the second pillar of Judaism. What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. This is the entire Torah, the entire Bible. The rest is just a commentary, go learn. Hillel, who embodied the quality of chesed, kindness, and generosity in Judaism, now presented the Gentile the yes of Judaism. Treat another human being like you want to be treated. You know, a chassid once came to the Maggid of Mezrich. His name was Rabbi Dov Ber. And he said, Rebbe, there's something I do not comprehend. When the Almighty commands us to do something or forbids a certain act, I understand that no matter how difficult it may be, no how much my heart strongly craves that forbidden course, I can do what God desires or refrain from doing what is against his will. After all, man has free choice. And by force of will, we could decide, of course, the action and stick to it no matter what. The same is true with speech, who's somewhat more difficult to control. I accept that it is within my power to decide which words will leave my mouth and which will not. But he looked at the Rebbe, he says, Rebbe, but what I fail to understand are those precepts which govern the matters of the heart. For example, when the Torah forbids us to even entertain a thought that is destructive and wrong, what is one to do when such thoughts enter his mind on their own accord? Can a person control his thoughts? So instead of answering the chassid, this Rebbe dispatched him to the town of Zhitomir. There's Litchfield, there's Oxford, there's Zhitomir. He says, go visit my disciple, Rabbi Zev. He is the only one that can answer your question. And the trip was made in the dead of winter. For weeks, the chassid made his way along the roads, which wound their way through snow-covered forests of White Russia. Of course, there was no SUVs at the time, and he was schlepping and schlepping. Midnight had come along, and the weary travel arrives in Zhitomir to Rabbi Zev's doorstep. And to his happy surprise, the windows of the scholar's study were alight. Even though it was so late at night, Reb Zev was deep in his Torah study. And through a chink in the shutter, the visitor could see Rabbi Zev bent over his books. But his knock brought no response. He waited a while, then tried once more. Still, he was completely ignored. He's totally ignored. And suddenly it's getting cold, and it's beginning to infiltrate his bones. And as the night wore on, the visitor, with nowhere else to do, kept pounding upon the frozen planks of Rabbi Zev's door, while the rabbi, who was just a scant few steps away, continued to study by his fireside, seemingly oblivious to the pleas which echoed through the sub-zero night. Finally, Rabbi Zev rose from his seat, opened the door, and warmly greeted his visitor. He sat him by the fire, he prepared him a glass of tea, and inquired after the health of the Rebbe. He then led his guest, still speechless, with cold, shivering bones, and he brought him to the best room of the house to rest his weary bones. The warm welcome did not abate the next morning, nor the one after. And Reb Zev was the greatest host, and he attended to the needs of a guest in the most exemplary manner. The visitor, too, was also a model guest, and he was considerate, and he was respectful. And if any misgivings about the midnight welcome reported him still lingered in his heart, but he kept it to himself. After enjoying the superb hospitality of Rabbi Zev, a week later, the visitor had sufficiently recovered from his journey, and he reached out to the Rebbe and says, Rebbe Zev, he says, the purpose of my visit is to ask you a question. Actually, our Rebbe sent me to you, saying that you could only be the one to answer the question to my satisfaction. And the visitor proceeded to outline his problem as he had expressed it earlier to the Maggid. And we had finished, Reb Zev said, tell me, my friend, is a man any less a master of his own self than of his own home? You see, says Reb Zev, I gave you my answer on the very night you arrived. In my home, I'm the boss. Whomever I wish to admit, I allow in. Whomever I do not wish to admit, I do not. Says Reb Zev, this is really the same thing with our thoughts. We are in control. And if you have a good breakfast in the morning, you don't go into your office looking for a snack. If your head is full with ethics and morals, there's no schmutz that comes in. So in the merit of us doing our Torah mitzvos, let's hope God will do his big mitzvah and free our hostages 7 months now and bring true peace all over the world, especially in our Holy Land. And may we merit the ultimate time, the coming of Mashiach. Any questions? So to summarize tonight, Shammai was teaching us that in Judaism, just like a home, you cannot say it's all yes. You want to put this measurement on that side, that measurement on this side, the window here. No, everything's going to be calculated. If there's lines in the road, you're able to go so much faster when there's no lines in the road. The same is true when it comes to Torah. We have the yeses and the nos, but the nos enable us that the yeses should go so much farther. So the merit of us doing our good, let's hope that God will do his good deed and send a complete healing to all those that need it. And may we merit to have the ultimate, the coming of Mashiach now. I want to wish everyone a very good Shabbos. A couple of very important announcements. Lag BaOmer is coming up, May 25th and May 26th. May 25th in Litchfield, 7:30, a beautiful kumsitz with great guests from the Holy Land. And May 26th, we have a huge singer from the Holy Land, Sandy Shmueli, who's going to be in the Southbury, Oxford area. It's chabadandw.org/unity. And we hope you join. And we want to wish everyone the best of health. And Am Yisrael Chai.